Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the interviews with the members of Working Group of Gender Equity. And today we have with us Professor Jasjeet Singh Bagla, and his research focuses on various aspects of cosmology, and this includes the gravitational clustering, cosmological n-body simulation, dark energy, and gravitational lensing. He's also interested in exploring the physics of the high redshift universe. So I welcome you, sir. So
Thank you so much, Vishaka.
Yes, sir. So the very first question that I have for you is that why did you choose the field of astronomy and astrophysics that you are into? What inspired you?
Well, it's part accidental. I think this was after my class 10 or 11 exams, and I liked exploring Delhi on foot. I was living in Delhi at that time, and we were walking around near Teenmurti House, and we just saw that a new planetarium had been opened over there.
Okay.
We went in, and we were told that the next show is after 3 hours. But I saw a notice that there is something called an Amateur Astronomers Association which is being formed, and a meeting of that will be held on the next day, which was a Sunday.
Okay.
The time was given. I showed up, and that is how I got started. This was the time when Comet Halley was expected. So this is back in 85, 86. And so there was a lot of activity around that, a lot of interest around that. And that is how I got hooked to astronomy. So I became an amateur astronomer first. And I wanted to do it professionally. So I asked around, and most people guided me in the direction of doing physics first and then specializing in astronomy later, which is the path I basically followed. My initial interest was more in planets and planetary sciences. Okay. But at that stage, I was told that there's hardly anyone in India who works on that.
Okay.
And by the time I finished my MSc, there was a lot of excitement in a couple of areas, including cosmology. So that is how I ended up in cosmology. So.
Okay, and so just a curious question around it, that you were you someone who were good at physics earlier, a good student in science, and that's how the interest also.
I was a reasonably okay student in science. I've never been one to do well in exams.
Okay.
But I did have an interest, and generally teachers did appreciate discussions and so on. So I thought I was at least not doing badly in terms of understanding, even if I was not good in terms of expressing things in exams.
Okay.
And yeah, so I was doing reasonably well there. And I got good mentorship during my bachelor's and master's. In Delhi University, there was a place called Center for Science Education and Communication. So this was just starting. I came to know of them because they held a short school, workshop/school on electronics in our college. And I attended that. So it was completely hands-on. It was very different from other activities which I had seen, which were all lecture-based. And after this, I went over to see what they have at the center. So they had a bunch of computers. So that was almost my first introduction to computers.
Okay.
And they had a library, and they had support for all kinds of activities. Okay. So they had a couple of small telescopes which they allowed us to use. They were also generous enough to allow us to kind of stay on at nights and do sky watching from there.
Okay.
So between the Amateur Astronomy Association, Nehru Planetarium, and Center for Science Education and Communication, I got pretty good guidance and support and mentorship, which helped me along. Yeah.
Okay, so when I talk about your role models and inspiration definitely, I mean, as you spoke about this hands-on workshop and this work, all these places around you that guided you. What about your role models? Any?
I would say that there was a group of theoretical physics faculty members in Delhi University, Department of Physics and Astrophysics. It's hard to kind of single out any one of them, but there were about half a dozen. who were all very interactive and all very encouraging.
Okay.
And they taught very well. So that was, of course, in masters.
Mm-hmm.
But they were always very welcoming in terms of discussions and interaction.
Mm-hmm.
I got to know some of them initially through the Center for Science Education and Communication, or
Mm-hmm.
CSEC as I called it.
Mm-hmm.
And over there, we used to receive notices for seminars in the Department of Physics and Astrophysics. I think
Okay.
the first one which I attended was a 2-day visitors program. So they had a whole lot of lectures going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I showed up, and then they realized that there is an undergraduate who has shown up, which was a kind of a
Unusual.
rarity,
Uh-huh.
unusual, because notices were not sent to colleges.
Okay.
Okay. So they mainly expected PhD students and a few master's students.
Mm-hmm.
So then they asked me who I was and where I was from, and then they were kind enough to say that, look, since you have come this far, I used to live about 15 kilometers from campus.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, why don't you come join us for lunch? So they
Oh.
took me along for the program lunch and so on. So that
Mm-hmm.
is how I got to know them,
Mm-hmm.
and they would always welcome questions and discussions. So if I was doing self-study on some topic, they would always be encouraging and answer questions if I had any. Not always answer questions in full. Okay, they would essentially set me on the path that you go explore this and see what
Explode.
happens.
Okay. So
Yeah.
this is interesting. I mean, I think this is one of the attributes. If I talk about, if you know inculcate this thing in the children of today's age, to explore the path. So though they find it
Yep.
very difficult when they say that they the very first thing they'll have is that they didn't tell me. They didn't tell me the answer. But
In
this
fact,
this.
one of the professors,
Mhm.
Professor Amitabh Mukherjee, he is now
Uh-huh.
retired.
Uh-huh.
He used to travel on bus, and
Mhm.
he would always have this used bus tickets in his pocket.
Oh.
He would write down hints at the back of a used bus ticket and give it to us that try this.
Okay. So good teacher for I'll definitely say. Okay, sir. So any do I mean because we are talking about working group of gender equity over here, do you remember any female teacher also over here who would have inspired you at that point?
We had some very good women teachers in college.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't that many in the university department.
Yes.
And as I started exploring beyond, like at the end of my BSc, I participated in the first IUCA NCRA summer program.
Mm-hmm.
So, like the introductory summer program, which is happening now.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
first one was held back in 1990.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one of the things which struck me was that there were so few women speakers.
Correct.
Okay. When contrasting with that, the visitors program, which I just mentioned, which I had attended when I was in my BSc. So,
Mm-hmm.
there again, there was only one female speaker, which was the
Okay.
legendary Professor Bimla Bhuti. Okay.
Okay.
And so the women faculty members and researchers were kind of few and far in between. So
Mm-hmm.
that is something that definitely was apparent. But at that stage, there wasn't so much of a discussion around it. And I think there is far more awareness now about the
Correct.
issues related
Correct.
to gender.
Yes, as we come across, and I was just going, through some research. While I was doing my research for this, I also came to understand this thing probably because I am an engineer, and I do understand that once you complete this 4 years of course, you get into a job, and then your life starts. Probably you start earning, and that's the job, right? But when we talk about someone who is actually interested in the core science, BSc, MSc, masters, then PhD, postdoc, all these things, a very few end up in the process of entering the college, doing the work, doing the research work, and then finally having a career into administrations and all academics. So what do you
Right.
think, so I mean, in your opinion, of course we know that there are it takes times, and then of course from a women point of view, if I say the family and everything constant that comes, but what according to you do you think that you saw or you felt?
No, I think there are quite a few things. One, of course, is that academics is a long journey. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a short journey, as
Mm-hmm.
you yourself put it. Uh, Right now, the situation is slightly different, but when I was in my bachelor's and master's, the job situation was pretty bad, pretty tough. Okay, and salaries were very low. I remember at the end of our first years in masters, when we had to sign up for electives for our third and fourth semester, Delhi University Physics Department was famous for offering a very large number of electives, and we had to pick two. So we had to do the same two courses in our third and fourth semester, getting to a fairly advanced level. One of the senior professors, Professor Sudhendu Rai Chaudhary, he walked up to the board, and on one side he wrote down names of all the advanced theoretical physics electives, general relativity and cosmology, quantum field theory, particle physics, and so on. And then he put a circle around them and added no jobs.
Oh. Okay,
So
so it
he
was
said that if you
because
are
of physics.
getting into this,
Huh.
I can assure you that there will be no ready job at the end of masters.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So you should be aware of that if you sign up for these courses, and you should be aware that it will be a longer haul. It will be rewarding, but you have to be prepared for that.
Correct.
And other professors also guided us, saying that if you go into academia, and this I'm not even touching the gender topic right now. So they mentioned that you have to be mentally prepared for a situation where you are finishing your PhD. You are already in your late 20s, if you're lucky. If you're not, you are not older. All of your contemporaries already have jobs. All of your contemporaries already are married. They have kids. They are buying houses.
They have a life, probably, the way we put
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So if you are ready to deal with this kind of a situation, only then step here. Otherwise, it can get very frustrating. So
Okay.
and looking back, I think it was a good advice, good reality check in some sense. And it was particularly true because at that time, the fellowships which were offered during PhD were far more meager compared to today. Okay. And that has changed now. And with that, it kind of becomes possible to have a reasonable life during PhD as well, which was not so easy earlier.
Earlier,
And
correct.
I think these were hurdles which were there, and these hurdles are much, much bigger when it comes to women because they face far more pressure from family, extended family, and so on than men do. Okay. To give you an example of how meager the fellowships were, numbers alone don't make sense, right? Because of inflation and so on. When I started my PhD, the junior research fellowship was 1,800 rupees.
Oh.
Okay. In Ayuga, we were lucky. We were in Ayuga, where we had a subsidized canteen and we had to pay a monthly bill of 600 rupees.
Okay.
And we did not have to pay any charges for the hostel.
Okay.
Okay.
Accommodation was free.
Accommodation was free, food was subsidized. For someone who was working in a university, 1,800 would be just about enough to meet these expenses. So these were all hurdles, and with gradual improvement in fellowships. So if I compare with students today, students at ISER Mohali, for example, they receive the junior research fellowship is now close to 30,000 rupees.
Okay.
Their monthly mess bill is of the order of 4 to 5,000 rupees. Okay. And their all of their fees and charges add up to of the order of 10 to 12,000 rupees per month, which means that they are able to save almost they keep 2/3 of the fellowship which they have for other expenses. So we did not have that luxury. So one of the friends was commenting that when we were students, it was ultra rare to see a PhD student getting married during their PhD thesis work. Okay. Now it is not so uncommon.
Oh, correct.
This is the reason because they do have money to spare now, which was not there earlier. And I think this is also helping in attracting women.
Okay, sir. So I'll be asking you, because you are one of the former member of working group of gender equity, how are you associated with this organization, and what do you think is the future roadmap for
Okay,
WGGE?
so actually, let me start before WGGE.
Uh-huh.
In 2013, the Astronomical Society of India meeting was held in Trivandrum.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And before the meeting, I received a request from a few members
Mm-hmm.
of ASI. I was the secretary at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I received a request for a meeting on the sidelines to have a working group which addresses issues related to
Mm-hmm.
gender equity, so on. So we had a nice meeting. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, we were helped by the fact that there was a total strike in Trivandrum at that time. So we were
Mm-hmm.
all trapped in the hotel. There was absolutely nowhere anyone could go.
Okay.
And so after all the sessions were over, after around 6:37 p.m., we had an hour-long meeting
Mm-hmm.
where the basic ideas were thrashed and the outlines of the proposal was put together.
Mm-hmm.
Neeraj Mohan Ramanujan, who is now at IAA, he had taken the lead in asking for this session, and there
Mm-hmm.
were others who were kind of interested. So the
Mm-hmm.
proposal took a formal shape and it was presented in the next ASI meeting, 2014, which was held in Mohali, Kaisa
Mm-hmm.
Mohali.
Mm-hmm.
And it was then that it was decided that we will have this group, working group.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
And when
mm-hmm.
the working group was formed, at that stage, since I had helped out as secretary of the society in allowing that seed to germinate, they asked me if I would like to be a member. I was happy to be a part of it for the
Okay.
first few years. Yeah, so that is
Okay.
how I ended up in
You
this.
got
And
associated
I
with.
think yeah, and I think it is a very, very important working group which needs to play a very active role in the community.
Mm-hmm.
We now have, if we see the around 70% of the astronomers in India today, working astronomers, are below the age of 30.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, we have a steadily improving gender ratio. So we need to address problems being faced by the younger lot and make sure that we don't. I mean, we all talk about leaky pipeline, where a lot of women do start off at masters and PhD level,
Correct.
even complete PhD, but don't end up with jobs. So we
Correct.
need to address concerns of this lot, the younger lot, to make sure that this problem does not affect them,
Mm-hmm.
and we have less of a loss for these people, and that is one of the most important roles which the working group has to play. And of course, there are other issues related to sexual harassment and so on.
Mm-hmm.
There are laws in place, but sensitization on these is required.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, so we need mentorship of younger people. We need to ensure that their path is smoother than
Mm-hmm.
the path for our generation was.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to sensitize them about the rules which are in place,
Correct.
so that they can have an easier time,
Mm-hmm.
and we grow as a community into a more sensitive and more inclusive one.
Okay. So do you think that as you mentioned right now, it's not just about the when I talk about sexual harassment in place or anything like that, it's more about the mental harassment that people get after getting back into a job, right? It's more sort of a mental, not just that the people who are coming, and I think because I'm talking about it because it's a personal feeling that when you get back to some place, after a break, maybe even a short break, 6 months, 1 year, people they start you know challenging you that you were not here, or this is all what has happened, you don't know. So that's more like rather than people also, it's more in your mind also. So how do you think that you people have addressed that for women especially?
uh, I don't think we have addressed it yet.
Okay.
The only place where we actually came close to addressing it was a very nice Annamani lecture, which
Uh-huh.
was organized.
Hmm.
This is by Vidya and from TIFR, and she talked about implicit bias,
Mm-hmm.
unconscious bias, and implicit bias,
Correct, correct.
and how these biases affect our behavior and our actions, and
Mm-hmm.
how we can overcome these. And
Mm-hmm.
that is a theme on which I think we need to have a larger discussion
Mm-hmm.
and sensitize people. If anyone, so you mentioned someone taking a break and coming back and then
Mm-hmm.
feeling getting a somewhat awkward feeling at workplace. See, anything where you feel that you are feeling a challenge because either you are a woman or you belong to a specific group, those situations need to be gotten rid of. And the only way to get rid of is to make people aware that they are mapping from their thinking of a group to an individual. Okay.
Correct.
There can always be a situation where you feel that an individual is not contributing enough.
Correct.
A reaction to that has to take a certain form. It cannot be a reaction to a group or a member of a group. Okay. Like, you're driving or you are going on a taxi, and even if there is no real problem, taxi driver will say, woman driver, that's why she did this.
Absolutely. I've seen this. Very common.
Right. But they will not comment to a 3 times or a 4 times worse driving by a male driver. This is an inbuilt group bias which they have. Okay.
Correct.
Now, we cannot educate all taxi drivers, but
Correct.
as an astronomer community, which is a small community, we can begin the process of sensitization and make them aware that such reactions are coming from a bias which is there in our head, and it may not have any real basis in reality when it concerns a specific individual.
So, to be honest, one thing, I'm just putting it out here. Let me know what you think about it. It's not just, when they say that it's from the other gender, women that they have been facing. It doesn't often come from a male. Probably it's more from a female colleague only. So,
So that labeling is very, very unfortunate. I mean, we can think of other instances also, and this is something which we try to work on with our students as well. If I have a student who has come into the program through reservations, the slightest of mistake from them will get them labeled.
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay. Whereas a general category student can make a bigger mistake, and nobody will think of, connecting ability of all the general category students with that kind of a mistake. So that this association is what we have to break.
Okay.
Okay. And that is basically what we have to work on.
Correct. Yeah. And so, is it more like, because I felt that this is more common, like in a group of female colleagues only. Do you think that it is also because of insecurities that these people have? That because some, of course, there are certain factors because of which they uh, they are not still yet not in that position, right? So do you also think that it's in between that female community also some sort of insecurity that I have to get here, I have to get there?
Certainly,
how do you address that? How do you address that? And how have you, or is it, or what are you thinking? How are you even picturing to address this?
Insecurities are very, very hard to address. Okay? People who have insecurities or people who feel that they deserve more but they haven't gotten enough, you can give them as much as you wish or as they wish. They'll still not be very happy. Okay.
Okay. And what about, there is only this position, only one, and there are two people who are competing for the same thing.
Right.
Then you definitely involve yourself into that political sting.
Yeah, that always happens. And in fact, you used to often joke with Padmanabhan that when you hold a administrative position, every time a problem comes to your table, you make at least one enemy, often two. Okay, because you may do your best to resolve a situation or be completely fair-handed. Even then, at least one of them will go back dissatisfied. Often both will go back dissatisfied. And so that is a problem which is there, because if someone has an expectation and they are not being reasonable, then there is nothing much which can be done about it. It is important for whosoever is trying to resolve the situation, like if there are one position, two candidates or three candidates, it is important to make it clear to everyone that what is the process that you are following. And if needed, you should be willing to at least discuss reasons for your choice.
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay. and give feedback to the person who is not getting the desired position.
Okay.
They may or may not be in a frame of mind to accept that feedback. Okay, so you give the feedback only if they are in that frame of mind, but you should be willing to have a discussion. And that can go some way, but I don't think it is possible to make people get rid of their insecurities in any obvious manner.
So one thing you definitely recommended this practice that people should come with. Any other, any other projects that you recommend?
I think it is important to have real data to work with. It is important to gather enough data. Like WGG in the first cycle, we had done a survey which was done at the ASI meeting in Srinagar. That was back in 2016. Not many people responded. I think the number of respondents was around 60, 70. Okay. But a few things were very clear in that. One of the things was that most of the people who were above 50 refused to recognize that there is any problem.
Okay.
Okay. Whereas people who were under 40, they all said that yes, there is a problem. So good to know that at least there is some sensitization. And then younger people, especially women, wanted more sensitization program and more mentorship.
Okay.
So what we need to do essentially is to gather enough data and then react to that, because you have the job of the working group is to address a problem.
Correct.
For that, we have to define the problem. And the problem is actually not being faced so much by people who are sitting in WGGE, because they are all senior people. Okay, they have gone above a certain level. So they need to listen. And I think there are enough examples. If all that you need to do is to look at archive in the last 4 or 5 years, I think you will find at least 10 papers from similar working groups in other astronomy associations, from AAS to Germany to France and so on. And they have collected data and they have shared what the perceptions are. So once that is in, I think WGG needs to have a larger discussion, not just within the working group, to see how one may go about addressing these and see what kind of programs can be initiated.
Correct.
So we definitely need data, and this is a point which Jocelyn Bell highlighted a lot. I mean, there was an online lecture by her arranged by, if you recall, and she highlighted this point that you need to have data at hand. And it's not that you fight on the basis of data, but whenever there are appointments where you feel that women have been overlooked or may have been overlooked, just keep flagging it.
Delayed
so that
recognition, basically. Delayed recognition that these people get. Okay,
Yes.
so I'm fortunate enough to have had interviewed her earlier. So yes, of course. So you mentioned about this demographic. So I want to come to that point. Do you think that when you said that people who were above, in their 50s or maybe above that, because they did not see any problem, because there were not a lot many women or female colleagues at that moment, at that level?
There were hardly any women colleagues,
Correct.
and it was also not even expected that women will be equal partners in the workforce.
Correct.
So their societal upbringing is different.
Correct. Even women from that community, their spouses, for that change, they have grown up. They did not face any challenge like this, or even if they face, they thought that it's a part and parcel of life. Right? This is how life works, and this is what they also pass on to the generation that is.
So thankfully, that perception has changed over time,
Uh,
and it is changing further. So that is a good part. And so I hope that this process will continue, and we can somehow facilitate the younger generation so that they face fewer hurdles.
So there was this data, that I went through, was that women in education, while the number has increased, women in science still increased. I'll not say that it has not, but again, the same thing that I taught: masters, it's okay; PhD, it's okay, and then again, this declines. Till date, it is existing. Till date, it is there.
Yes.
What do you think
Yes.
that today that we have addressed so many problems, so many, and of course, we get a lot of support from all the colleagues also, and our parents also. What do you think, that is there any barrier that people have to themselves only? I mean, they have something in their mind. Why are they not able to pursue this
One
way?
is that it could be a matter of choice.
Okay.
If they are choosing a career which is not in academics because it's a long haul. So the
Mm-hmm.
best thing to address this problem would be to first identify the route.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if I was a statistician,
Mm-hmm.
I will look at all the PhD graduates from a department in the
Mm-hmm.
last 10 years
Mm-hmm.
and talk to them, and also figure out what percentage of men have stayed in academia, what percentage of women have stayed in academia, how many of men have got jobs, how many of women have got jobs. So by looking at that data, maybe some pattern will emerge,
Okay.
because each person makes an individual decision,
Mm-hmm.
and it could just be that the smaller number of jobs in academia discourage women more,
Mm-hmm.
because finishing PhD means you are in your late 20s,
Correct.
and if you want to have a family, if you want to have kids, then
Science
that
can.
five
I
to
mean, this
6 year
cannot wait.
period, that kind of coincides.
uh,
That coincides with the time when you want to be a postdoc, when you are looking for jobs and so on.
mm-hmm.
So that is one. And one recommendation which WGG and other bodies have put out repeatedly is not to have an age bar when we are looking at recruitment.
Okay.
Okay. So many places in the last 10 years have taken to explicitly putting 35 as an age bar.
Mm-hmm.
And that, in my view, is not a good idea.
Okay.
What you can do is how many years of active research you have done after your PhD.
Mm-hmm.
In case someone has taken a break, you subtract those years from calendar age.
Mm-hmm.
So you should have that kind of flexibility. In fact, this is something which we had implemented at the Harishchandra Research Institute, that
Mm-hmm.
we will not look at the calendar age, we will just look at how much experience someone has after PhD, so
Mm-hmm.
that they don't lose out on the grounds of having taken a break.
Correct.
So there are some things like this which can certainly be done,
This is a
but
great
we need to
suggestion.
find out. But we need to find out more.
Mm-hmm. So, what I felt is that if we have someone along with us whom we are working, we are compatible with, we understand each other, probably understand, the moment we say something, trying to explain you something, uh, the person gets it and helps you in attaining that thing. So, here, when I talk about that, there is a challenge that people don't hire, maybe not in your organization, as you mentioned this thing. Uh,
Right.
but then, can this not be considered as one point of strength while people they hire a couple in place, and they also act as each other's support if someone is on a break? And of course, I do understand that there'll be a parallel in contrary to this, we can say that they will support each other even if they are not near due to that emotional attachment. They'll support them
Right.
like that. Yes.
Right. No, that is essentially the argument which people use, that
Mm-hmm.
they will not act independently and objectively at all times.
Mm-hmm.
And in any group, any department, particularly when it comes to larger organizations, you have
Mm-hmm.
each person has to interact with many,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore it can lead to difficulties of various kinds. Okay, there is also issues of conflict of interest which can arise if both are not at the same level.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen situations where the institute does hire a couple,
Mm-hmm.
but if both of them work in a very similar area,
Mm-hmm.
then it they find it difficult to attribute whose work is which one, and are, are we getting two promotions for the price of one? So
Okay.
this kind of questions also get asked.
Yes.
Sometimes they are reasonable, sometimes they are unreasonable, but
Okay.
these questions can be asked.
Mm-hmm.
uh, my counter to most of such objections is that if I have a department of, let's say, 30 people,
Mm.
is it not possible, or is it very unlikely that two or three of them who are not married, may be from the same gender, in fact, may not have any sexual inclination towards each other. But even then, they can form a group of friends, and they can also act together, and they can also try to help each other out. How is that conflict of interest different from that in case of a couple? It's not. Okay. No, but the thing is, it's not just a married couple who can form a unit inside a department or an organization. There are friendship circles, there are groups of people who have similar interests. Those interests may be of very different type than science interests, but they can form such cliques and groups,
Absolutely.
and they also create, they can potentially create problems within the institution. And it is not very different from that for a couple.
So do you think
Uh,
that going further, the
yeah,
roadmap that we talked about, you can define certain metrics for all these problems also? I mean, checkbooks, tick marks on that, where you have these conflict of interest. Can you introduce some metrics in that so that people who want to
not easy, not
not
easy.
easy. Okay.
May not be impossible.
Uh-huh.
I have not. I have thought a little bit about it. Not by no means enough.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but yeah, it's not a very straightforward thing, and but certainly it is something which people should keep thinking about, and maybe someone will come up with some useful ways.
Mm-hmm.
In general, I am very wary of metrics, because then people start focusing on the metric than on real issues.
Okay. Okay, sir. So another question that I have is that as a member of the working group of gender equity at ASI, how do you inspire students to actively promote gender equity? Do you think that uh, you can also bring some practice to form this? The younger generation, as you talked about, that they are facing these things in their 30s and all that. Do you think that there can also be a committee of these people? Maybe a member, they are also a member, junior members probably, and then they can bring out the real issues, what they are.
Actually, our undergraduate students have formed a group of that
Okay.
kind,
Okay.
and they have been organizing some discussions and talks and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But what is most important is to set an example.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you the kind of situations where inequity begins to creep in. Okay. I have a classroom discussion, or I have a group discussion. And if I see one person cutting another person off,
Mm-hmm.
it is very important for me as a moderator or a teacher in that situation to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that there is a balance.
Okay.
Okay. And make everyone realize that they have an opportunity to speak,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time make them realize that it is not a case of you know uh, trying to up the ante or trying to dominate the discussion. Everyone has to get an opportunity to speak, everyone is going to be treated equally, and everyone will get time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we will not kind of rush through things. So by setting such examples and ensuring decorum even in that small a setting, I think that goes a long way in ensuring that bullying and harassment and snide remarks, etc., are avoided at bigger platforms.
Okay. Okay, so the very this will be my second last question to you, because I have another question which is like, there's a discovery recently. So I have a
Mhm.
question for you on that. But then what do you want to say to the young budding scientists? Any word of wisdom that you want to give to them? Tell them.
Well, I don't know if I have enough wisdom to give, but
Mm.
yeah. So one of the things which I worry about at present is that a lot of science is shifting to very large groups.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Very, I mean, groups which are much bigger than single institutions and so on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In some cases, it is a necessity. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
something like LIGO could not have been achieved with fewer than a couple of thousand people contributing at various levels. But at the same time, creativity and ideas are a very individualistic or a small group kind of a dynamic. They don't. They are. They are not at home in a very large group in some sense. And with a large group, management of the group sometimes takes precedence over individual creativity.
Okay.
Okay. So the main advice which I would give is to keep your skill levels up. In a very large group, you may end up doing a very specialized, focused job, and that may actually kill your creativity in the sense that you may not have enough time to build a larger picture of your own field and able to define a research program in your own field if you kind of get stuck and become a cog in the wheel.
Okay.
That is something which people should avoid and work on your skills. That is the thing which will really carry you through always. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, sir. So I have this question, and I think you will be the one who can make me understand this thing. My question is: astronomers have captured the first view of polarized light and the magnetic field that surrounds Sagittarius A, the supermassive black hole at the heart of Milky Way. What does this mean for astrophysics, and particularly in the science related to black holes?
Well, this tells us more about the accretion flows which exist around Sagittarius A star. And if you recall the Event Horizon Telescope, people, even though they started observing Sagittarius A star and M87 at the same time, they released the image of M87 first. Okay. Because Sagittarius A star has too much of a variability in terms of accretion, and it took them a long while to get over it, when overcome difficulties posed by that variability. So what we learn from here is more in terms of what is the broad accretion pattern around the Sagittarius A star supermassive black hole, and how is the magnetic field organized over there. So this is something which has just come out. We're talking about publication from this week itself.
Yes.
So we'll have to understand it a little bit more. There are standard models for how accretion disks operate, both in the Shagura-Suneyev kind of a disk model as well as the advection-dominated accretion flows. And I guess people will start figuring out which one applies more appropriately to accretion in Sagittarius A star. Sagittarius A star does not have a very pronounced, steady kind of image. Event Horizon Telescope people themselves have talked about how the significant variability is there. So even with that variability, they have been able to capture the magnetic field structure, which I think is really, really remarkable. Okay. So we'll learn more about it. I myself would not know much at the moment. If you really
know, is that this is more about theoretical part that you people are studying, right? It's more about theoretical, and like, you know, when now that JWST is in place and we are getting more of the data is in place since last 5 years, if I say. How do you explain this about your work, that you have been carrying out your work since a very long time, studying the theoretical part, deriving all the calculations? How does this help you, and what do you think has changed?
Right. So my work, one of the themes in my work from the start has been formation of large-scale structure and formation of galaxies. And in this stream, the conventional wisdom has been that we have hierarchical clustering. The earliest galaxies to form were very, very small. They gradually became bigger. And if you had asked someone, any cosmologist, let's say 3 years ago, they would have told you that we will not find any active galactic nuclei or very massive black holes at redshift beyond 6. So the number of galaxies that JWST has found in the last 1.5 years, which are at redshifts much higher than 6, is astounding. Okay. And it certainly seems to be more than what people naively expected. People are still working on possible explanation, but it could kind of stretch the standard cosmological model. But what has been even more surprising is that we are finding very massive black holes in the early universe at redshifts much higher than 6. And in some of these cases, the black hole is actually as massive as the galaxy itself. I mean, in the sense that all the stars in the galaxy, all the gas in the galaxy weighs just about as much as the black hole. Whereas if we look at galaxies at present, then black holes typically are a very small, the mass of the supermassive black hole is a small fraction. It's like 1.1% of the total mass. We can take M87 as an example. The galaxy mass is much more than 10 to the 12 solar masses. The black hole mass is around 10 to the 9 solar masses.
Okay.
So we start to discover systems where the black hole mass and the stellar mass is comparable.
Okay.
We need to come up with a good explanation as to how that can be.
How it's possible, or
because
what's the science involved?
Yeah, because the traditional explanations or models for formation of supermassive black holes are that they start out with the stellar mass black holes, which merge and form very big black holes. But if you already have a very big black hole in place before you have formed the stars in a galaxy, then you have to turn the model around. It's not that there are no models. There are a couple of models which people had proposed earlier. I think Priya Natarajan was one of the pioneers in that. And so people have to go revisit those models and see whether they will fit the bill, whether they will predict the kind of characteristics which we are seeing. Right now, only a few instances are known, but as JWST continues to operate, we'll have more. JWST has been in the science mode for just over 1.5 years.
Correct.
Right. And in the next 3, 4, 5 years, we will have a lot more data. And then maybe we'll begin to see a pattern, and then we can zero in on the explanation. But certainly, the data which we have right now is challenging the standard model.
Okay.
People have to come up with the clever answers.
Correct. And that's where I think, with more data, people that you said that there are a lot of people now getting into this. A lot of children also, they are excited to know the unknown. They are getting in this field. I mean, this had a minimal exposure earlier, but now a lot of people are interested in this. Schools have curriculums, if I say, based on this. Okay, so thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us today.